Let me ask you a question. Is the New Jersey mob dead? Hello, I'm Tom Levecki here with the latest edition of the Armchair NBA. First, let me introduce my co-host, Jason JSB Capital Venturelli.
Hello, everyone.
Also host of the New Theory podcast. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Tom. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
All right, we have a very special return guest. If you haven't seen the first long-form interview, I'll put a link below. His name is Giovanni Rocco, or his Saint Italian Giovanni, author of Giovanni's Ring. He took down the real Sopranos. We're talking Jersey. We're talking the mob. Giovanni Rocco, welcome back to the Armchair NBA. How you doing today?
Hey, Tom. Great to be back. Hey, Jay. Good to meet you.
All right.
Likewise.
So we're gonna jump right in. I'm gonna first read the community questions, and make sure you buckle up because they tend to be pretty raw. But first, why don't we do this? Why don't we talk about why did you become a cop? Let's talk about that. You don't have to go into full detail because I know it was on the old interview, but feel free to catch people up who haven't seen it yet. So why did you become a cop?
I read the book. It's in the book. It tells exactly why you became a cop.
Hey, people they have to buy the book, but we got to show a little leg.
Yeah, listen, I could sum it up. I chose a side. I chose the good guy's side a long time ago, right? I tried out the bad guy's side. I wasn't an arch criminal or anything like that, but I was a kid that was the black sheep of the family, and I realized, I was influenced by my grandfather, my father, my uncles who were cops. And, I knew at a young age, I write about it in the book. I knew the exact moment coming home from watching Raiders of the Lost Ark in Jersey City at the movie theater. And I watched my old man make a collar. And that was it. That's when I knew I wanted to be a cop.
Wow. Okay. And then, so you grew up in Hudson County, specifically Bayonne. For people that don't know Bayonne, it's a weird place. It's like there's only one way in. There's two ways in, but kind of really only one way in. And it's like its own enclave, literally. Not to knock it, but I'm a huge Bayonne fan, but it's like a snapshot in time. Walk us through about Bayonne for people that are, not from New Jersey.
So Bayonne, I wrap it up, it's very Brooklyn-esque, right? The old school Brooklyn mentality. Everybody came over off the boat, no matter what, where you were from. Everybody that came over came through Jersey City. A lot of people wound up in Jersey City, Bayonne, Hoboken, yep. And they just stayed there. Bayonne, I describe it as living on a cul-de-sac, living on a dead-end street, because it's a peninsula. There's one, like you said, Tom, one way in, one way out.
Correct.
And if you didn't belong there when we grew up there, you stood out like a sore thumb. Everybody knew. And if you tried to do something bad, it's the same thing as trying to commit a crime on a dead-end street. You're not going to make it out. They're going to catch you. Very tight-knit community. It still is to this day, and it's changed over the years for the better. It's building and growing. But, yeah, it's very blue-collar-esque. You had a mix of good guys, bad guys. It's the home of the original Rocky Balboa story. Chuck Wepner's from Bayonne.
That's right.
That's how we grew up. It was very, very tight knit. So no matter what side of the fence you were on, you were raised by the entire community of Bayonne. It was the whole city was one big neighborhood and still is.
So this backstory on me, Giovanni. I worked on the Bayonne docks. You know where the cranes are?
Yeah.
That's why. I mean, they've been there for years. That's where I worked. I was with the longshoremen. I was an operation manager over there. And I'm talking, recently, not in the last 2 years, but I mean, in recent time. And Giovanni's right. Bayonne is still holding true, the old school mentality, blue collar environment. They got the Chuck Wepner mural on the side of the bar. What bar is that? I don't even know. I forget what bar that is, but they got the huge, it's got to be 2-3 stories high of Chuck Wepner, a painting of him on the side of a bar.
Bayonne was famous. Bayonne was famous because of the naval base. Before it was the global terminal, well, global Jersey City, but before it was Motby, it was an old naval base. And everything during the World War I, World War II left out of Motby.
Not to get off topic here, but all that is where the cruise ships come in. What was all those empty, almost like warehouses? Everything's hollowed out. Was that the naval base or whatever? What was that?
That was a hub. That was Motby, Military Ocean Terminal. That was, again, you needed to have a longshoreman or a DOD license to work there. Everything that left during World War I, World War II, the bodies that came back from war, they came back and they were storage. Those big buildings that you saw that you're referring to, they were war buildings. They planned wars there, and there were war rooms upstairs.
If you were to go there now, they have a 9/11, site there right on the water there. But you have to drive through those old buildings, and it's like a ghost town.
Yeah,
it's like it's hollowed out. You can tell it's from years and years ago and hasn't been used. Yeah, it's a weird situation. You got the cruise ship there, you got the working docks, and you got this like ghost area from those days that they no longer use.
No, so much history there, so much, Jay. Right. I mean, even that, not to get off topic, like you said, that Cuba Gooding Jr. and Robert De Niro film about him being a sailor and a dive captain or something like that, a dive master. That was Bayonne Terminal. That was Motby.
Wow.
That actually has got so much history. So.
Oh, wow. Well, so one of the things that I found interesting, because you were the perfect guy to do this, and you know this, but I want to reiterate from the Jersey guy perspective, right? So believe it or not, the Cavalcantes were not based in Newark. Tommy Stiggs is in the chat. He can tell you that the Cavs were never that strong in Newark. The home base was Elizabeth, right? So, but if you were from Newark, you know how it works. Somebody would play a little geography, find out who you were or weren't. If you were from Patterson, the same thing. But you were able to navigate in Elizabeth because Bayonne is a similar mentality. But growing up, it was mostly the west side, the Genovese growing up, right? So why don't you walk through the mob landscape in Bayonne? And that's why I think you were able to do it. Because if there were the Cavalcantes, a lot of them in Bayonne, it would have been harder to do. So why don't you walk through your kind of the mob landscape in Bayonne growing up?
So, yeah, I mean, you're right, Tom. It was a little bit of everybody, right? From what I saw since birth, right? Growing up there, you could not be around. It was John DiGilio. If you're a real aficionado with mob guys in the Jersey area, it was John DiGilio and Tino Fumara, right? Genovese guys. They controlled the docks. They controlled everything in the seaport, over in Newark and on the Jersey side in Motby. So Johnny DiGilio, Johnny D as we called him, Mr. D, he controlled everything on the Motby. So everything coming in and out of that global Motby terminal was controlled by the mob. Like you said earlier, Jay, all the Twix cards, everything, all the longshoremen, he oversaw all that growing up as a kid. And then you had the longshoremen's headquarters that was in Bayonne also. So he had a complete control. It was a mix. I mean, in my 20s, when I first came on the job, and growing up, I was still living in Bayonne. I was transitioning out after I came on the job. And, John Gotti owned property and businesses in Bayonne. I saw him personally at businesses taking meetings. Oh, wow. And then the Cavalcantes, they did as well. We had some Cav guys, made guys that lived there, had businesses there. And actually, they did a lot of developing in Bayonne, which when I did this case, I had to walk on eggshells so I didn't bump into these people.
Oh, shit.
Touching on that real quick, you know what happened? You were in law enforcement, Giovanni. You know what law enforcement did to us Italians? You want to talk about discrimination. My last name is Venturelli.
Yeah.
I got a TWIC card and I got a Waterfront card.
Yeah.
You have a last name with a vowel.
Yeah.
They discriminated against you. Are you with organized crime? You got to fill out a questionnaire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was so ticked off when I got my gold.
Like that, Giovanni, being on the other side. Come on.
It's tough growing up. Yeah. Waterfront Commission. Everybody was all over the docks. Everybody was all over both sides of the water in Newark, Port Newark. If you had a Twix card, that was gold. You know that, right? And you didn't want to lose it. So in the height of the mob in the 80s, into the 90s, when I was doing investigations, I was so mad. And I talk about it in the book. When I got made a detective and I wanted to do work early in my career, they put me in vice and organized crime. I was so mad because growing up, I'm like, so what do you want me to do? You want me to chase around bookmakers all day and people going to the waterfront with Twix cards? Come on. I want to be a narcotics guy. I want to be an undercover. I want to go, wrestle around in the streets. And, but looking back, it was an amazing career I had, because I learned a lot.
Yeah, they looked at Italians in a whole different light, trying to get a TWIC card or oceanfront card.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in your day, trying to be a cop too, they were probably looking at you.
They scrutinized everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
And especially growing up in that neighborhood, who you associated with. And I talk about it in the book. Even though I was a cop's kid, sometimes it came back to bite me. Even through Hudson County and all the different areas and different towns, if you were known, guys looked at you and go, well, I talked about it in the book. I had friends and family that were connected to biker organizations. So, I was a bad kid. So when they wanted to give me the job, I had gone through a lot. Like, listen, are you done? Are you finished being a jerk off? Pretty much, are you finished? Can I trust you to give you this job? And I was like, yeah. No worries.
Now, you brought a great point and a great segue. So we don't want to give too much of the book away, but, Giovanni rides bikes. You used to ride your bike to work. You got a little shit from it from the captain. But my point being is you got in with bikers first before you got into LCN. Why don't you walk us through that? Because I think that kind of sets us up for the next step.
Yeah, I mean, I never saw my persona again growing up in the 80s and 90s. All the movies that were out were, narcs that were growing beards and had long hair and biker things. That's the persona. It wasn't until the 90s when Donnie Brasco came out or something like that, but the sexiness was, as a young cop, to be this dirty, dingy, undercover cop, right? That was what you wanted to be. I never in a million years thought, like, later in my career, I should have smartened up at a young age. Instead of growing my beard, I had to talk about it. I ate better, just being me, being myself, being the culture that I'm from. Eat better food, dress better. I could be myself. I didn't have to, I picked the other side, like the clean cut version.
I love that. So now this is important. Okay. So we talked about how we had some biker experience, and that in the book will kind of dovetail later on, and also in this interview or kind of recap. But then this is what I like about him. He grew up as a cop, but he got picked by an FBI task force. Kind of a big deal for like a Hudson County guy, right? Walk us through that, and then we'll get into some questions, because that of all of it really kind of stood out for me. I was like, wow, that's really impressive. Like, you had to really stand out. What did you do to stand out, and why were you chosen?
I guess it was a little bit of stupidity at times, Tom. I mean, I did some RICO cases, right? So I was with the DEA for a number of years. I was doing some work with them on task forces, and I was loving it, doing drug jobs, and it was great. Yeah. But then when I started doing RICO cases, and I started doing FBI cases with them and joint investigations, that's when they came to me, because they realized while your typical FBI agent or your typical cop or investigator will sit in a car or a van all day long, me, I pushed the envelope. Yeah. The Carrazzo brothers with the Gambinos, I did a case with them, and I pushed the envelope to where I'm a kid from Bayonne. I know how to walk the walk, just be myself. So when these guys, were following and doing surveillance, they were, I don't know who's in there. We don't know how many people are in the restaurant. We don't know who's in the pizzeria. And I'd be over in New York doing, surveillance. Yeah. I would just go in and see who's there. Yeah. And I walked right in, and here's the Carrazzo brothers and all these people sitting there and guys in the back room of the pizzeria. And I walk in, and just as you would, just as Jay would, or you would do, you walk into a pizzeria and go, oh, I need a phone. Where's the house phone? Can I use your phone? And you just be loud and boisterous. And I fit in, and they loved it. So it was silly stuff like that. Then later on, when, we did a case with Nicky Scarfo Jr. and a bunch of guys. And again, it was, me on video holding the door for them at the end. And here I was, and they're like, listen, you're getting too close to the targets. You can't be on top of these guys. So then finally it was a case I did, another RICO case where some stolen stuff. And I just went in and bought, it was a bunch of bed sheets, like, right off the truck, fell off the back of the truck. And they're all sitting there trying to figure out how to send an informant in and how to just go and buy the bed sheets. It's a tanning salon. It was in Staten Island. Let's go in and buy the frickin' bed sheets. So I walked in, and, word spreads fast. The next thing you know, they're saying, you should be trained and certified as an undercover.
Well, that's so because you weren't legacy FBI, did you go through traditional undercover training, or did you get what everybody else gets? That was kind of like, I read your book, because it seems like, in a way, you were advanced in that, and it could put you almost in a crash course, but you were like organically just pretty good undercover. Walk us through that training. What did they, what are some of the lessons they teach you?
I can't walk you through too much because they're afraid of, tradecraft and all that, but I can give you a brief overview. So with me, I had a lot of training. I talk about in the book, all the training I had self-taught, but there was a lot of things I was doing bad. I made a lot of missteps. Just being a street kid, you don't always make the right decision when you don't have the right training. So when they came to me and they asked me if I would be interested, and it's full on board. When you become a task force guy with the FBI, you get your creds, you get FBI creds.
Wow.
You're all in. I mean, you're an FBI employee, and then when you become an undercover with them, you're an FBI employee. You're an undercover employee. So,
wow.
Yeah, there's no difference, other than the fact that those guys might have gone to Quantico and been trained.
Yeah. You end up in the same spot.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I'm an FBI task force guy, so I'm treated like everybody else. And then this elite unit, where it was a national covert operations unit, that's when it's undercover work on steroids 2 times over. The training you go through is rigorous. Just the amount of sleep deprivation. They literally will drain your brain and then make you negotiate for your life.
Now I always kind of wonder because with Donnie Brasco, what's his name? Pistone stood out as kind of being like the only Italian guy from the area. Now when you went into the undercover training, when you dealt with the case agents, was it Italian American representation, or was it still kind of waspy at that point?
No, I mean, without giving too much, again, you're trained to go into anything. Once you have that training, you have an understanding. A lot of human, right? What we call human intelligence.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. You could put me in front of a Muppet. You know what I mean? So,
Jason's
you're going to learn.
Muppet,
what's that?
Jason's a Muppet.
So, you could communicate with anybody. You can negotiate. You can be. Yeah. It's all about ingratiation, rapport building. And not misstepping, because a lot of undercover work is if you say the wrong thing. Think about it. In the way we grew up, if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person, that'll get you into a street fight pretty damn quick.
Yep. And
now put yourself into some Russians, put yourself into some Chinese organized crime.
Yep.
Language barriers. Well, everything that comes out of your mouth, you better be very precise on what you say, because one step, one move, and you're looked at sideways. This is not the movies. It's not acting. Yeah. By no means is it acting. You can't put on an act because you don't get second takes.
That's right.
A lot of times when later in my career, I did this work and I questioned, what the hell am I doing? I remember one time in San Francisco, I was in a Ritz getting dressed, and I literally I was going in with some pipe hitting, murdering people that I was about to have a meeting with. And, I'm trying to put my tie on, and it was me, I'm all about controlling my breathing, and I'm very composed. But I was like, what am I doing here? This is crazy. I'm going to get killed. So
I have. So we're gonna roll out some questions because and then we'll get back to the arc. But my one question before I go to the community question, and Jason has a lot of them too, is how and I do not want to compare an undercover to an informant. You were on the other side of the law. You were clear. It's what you do. So I don't want to besmirch you in any way, right? However, being an Italian American, kind of coming from that area, putting guys away that kind of grew up, like us, Italian American and so forth, even though you were on the right side of the law, did it feel, for lack of a better word, weird being undercover against these guys? Or you were so ingratiated in your law enforcement kind of prowess that you were like, you know what, this is a job and that's it? Walk us through how you got through that.
No, there's always a fear. There's always a fear of being outed. It could be anything at any moment. I could have dealt with Jay in a personal way, not in a criminal way and not in a government way. It's just somebody I knew from my past. Maybe we went to high school together, and boom, like that old, in a lot of films, you saw that stuff. It happened a lot. God forbid, you bump into somebody. So the fear of being outed, and the biggest fear, like you compared the two, was an informant versus an undercover. Yeah. A lot of times you'd rather an informant, if they think you're a rat, they're going to do you a lot faster. But then there's organizations out there, international, that we've dealt with, that if they think you're government, they'll chop your head off just as fast.
Russian OC or something.
You're worth more money if they kidnap you, if they torture you. You look at a guy like Kiki Camerano from the from the DEA and the horrible things they did to him. Knowing what these organizations do out there, you know.
Good point. So we're gonna jump into some questions from the board. I know Genovese were superior in all in New Jersey, but how do the politics work in North Jersey? The 5 families of Philadelphia have to get permission from the Cavalcantis. So during your tenure in undercover, did the Cavalcantis kind of rule the roost, or did everybody kind of coexist?
Everybody coexists. It's like that today. It was like that back then. You know, you just can't step on the wrong toes. I learned a lot. I mean, you know, yes, I had an understanding of how things went as a young kid driving by a gas station right across the street from the longshoreman headquarters. Yeah. That was Johnny D's. Johnny Diglio did his meetings there. And, you know, I knew as a young kid riding my bike past there, if he was talking to somebody and it was a heavy hitter, you could tell, right? But yeah, you know, these guys, they survive. Each Borgata survives by checking in with the other. You don't want to step on somebody else's toes. Once I was in with the family and I was in under Charlie, he gave me my crash course in how it works. He gave me, and I talk about it, sticking my flag in the dirt. If I go somewhere and I meet somebody, you have to let it be known who you are. Stick the flag in the dirt, make it known who you are, make it known whose flag you fly, you know, and then start your business. Right?
Side question. A lot of people watching are mobologists. They love this stuff. They eat this stuff. They breathe this stuff, movies, that kind of stuff. Myself in the same shoes, but I had the dubious pleasure of meeting, you know, made guys growing up and people that were connected, but I was never in, right? When you got in as an undercover, what are 1 or 2 things that surprised you, good or bad, that was like, oh shit, you know what? I didn't know this, or wow, this is disappointing. Like, what are 1 or 2 things, good or bad, that you experienced that once you got in were much different than everybody like us looking from the outside?
Well, for the mobologists, I could say that once I was in, it was explained to me how the decavs exist now. How at that time we flew under the Gambino flag.
Wow, so
right? We were overseeing. That was a very eye-opening thing for me. Yeah, because again, coming from that neighborhood.
Yeah. You're
can't hear you.
All right. How was that translated to you when you stepped in that you're running under the flag of the Gambinos? I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow when you're your own family and we're in Jersey and you're running an organization over here. How was that said to you? Like, watch what you say. Listen, the Gambinos really run.
It happened at a funeral, allegedly. Riggy and Gotti got together for an important funeral. I think D'Amato's. And Gotti pulled Riggy into a room for like 2 hours. When they got out, you know, Gotti being himself, and Riggy turned white. And Riggy's a powerful guy. I heard after that point, that's when they put the monster.
Well, what I really meant was, how was it told to you, Giovanni? Like,
good point.
What's the lingo there? Like,
so again,
be like, hey, listen, watch what you say. We're tied up with the Gambinos, and they really run this shit over here.
Right, and you have to wait. You have to be patient, Jay. You can't just go. So, Jay, tell me how it is. How do I get a Twix card? So I want to get a Twix card.
Come here, speak a little closer.
Yeah. So do I have to see you? Who do I have to pay? Who do I have to go see? How does it work? You're going to look at me and go, "That Fango, get out of here." Right? So you really have to wait, and you better hope that maybe they trust you enough to bring you in. Right. Yeah. And it took a long time. It was a long time before. And I made Charlie work for it a little bit. You know,
but it was known throughout you going through the ranks there that the Gambinos really ran the decavs, right?
No, I was privy to that because of my skipper. My skipper trusted me enough. I knew very, very intimate conversations. I knew very intimate details of how things worked because he had a plan for me. He had a future for me, and I didn't ask for that. That kind of developed.
Oh, wow. Right. So he kind of told you how it really worked with the Gambinos and the decavs.
Yeah. Yeah. As simple as when Jimmy Smalls had, early in the case, he was trying to win me over, and he would say to me, "Well, my uncle's a captain. My uncle's a soldier," and that was how the conversation started. And I knew exactly what he was talking about, but I can't go, "Oh yeah, what family?" So I play stupid.
Yeah,
I'm a biker. I come from a biker background. I look like I do now, right? I didn't look like a biker. I was a biker trying to infiltrate the mob.
Yeah.
And again, Jimmy trying to win me over was my uncle's was, oh, he's in the army? Like, what? No. So I made you work for it, right?
Yeah.
And then when I met Charlie, I did the same thing. Hey, I don't know how this works. I don't want to misstep. And he actually, when I became and when I got into good graces with Charlie, he wanted me to come out. Come out, and I write about it. Come out to Vegas, come out to Nevada. We need to have a conversation in person. And he was very, very big. He just didn't have diarrhea to mouth and start telling me these things. He was very cautious.
That's why I was surprised. He's known for being a very tight-lipped guy, a tight circle guy. And to give some context, so the previous show I was with a made member, we had a show together, and he said it was often when somebody was on paper or the big money guy or whatever, you're a captain with nobody under them, and that was Charlie. He was on paper, or at the very least, he was a skipper, but he didn't have people under him. Correct?
Right. I hit it at the right time, Tom. I mean, I came into this thing as he was coming out, from a long bit.
Yeah.
And then he was looking to rebuild, and then he came out. We knew, intelligence knew, we actually knew the night he got made captain. That was long before I infiltrated. Like, not long before, but that was before I infiltrated. So we knew that, we knew he had gotten made. He got his button. We knew where.
So captain by name only, which is such a weird. If you know,
there's reasons for it though, because one is if you're on paper, you can't fraternize. Number two, it might be a positive thing. You might be like kind of a money guy, like you might be a money guy, but not a street guy. So it's like they want your money, they'll give it to you as a token thing. Or opposite, you're a fucking numbnut, but they got to keep you around, so they put you. So the way Panisi explained to me, there's a few reasons why somebody would have to be a captain with no people. That's why, because I was scratching my head, and every time Giovanni, every time I call him, he doesn't always pick up because he knows I chew his ear off. But the thing is, that was my thing. It's like, how did you get so close to a captain? That's kind of why.
I think you have a crew underneath you. Your crew does the work. And
well, and again, Charlie is a unique person, right? He's a unique he's a gangster's gangster. Make no mistakes. That guy's been a gangster since birth. He didn't need anybody to teach him a life. He taught the life, and he still could. The stars just aligned for me, and it just, my mannerisms, whatever it was, sparked something in him. Or I can't speak to that. Whatever happened between us. But he is, from here to the old world, he's respected. This is a guy that he's not afraid. If he had an issue with you, he'll drop you right where you stand. He's not looking around. He's not, nothing's happening nothing's happening that he doesn't care. He doesn't care. When a guy looks at you and says, listen, I kill more people by accident.
Yeah.
And he's dead serious, like he's a gangster's gangster. Yeah. So he didn't have to ask permission. He represented that family. He lives and dies Cosa Nostra.
Yeah. So this is from one of the viewers. I'll toggle back and forth. Giovanni, there was simultaneous undercover FBI operations at the time in Chinatown, San Francisco, and Vegas named Operation White Suit. Did you have any role in that operation or with that agent?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Yeah. That's the other thing, guys.
He's know by now that he can't talk about certain stuff, guys.
Well, that's what he actually has another phone that says, Tom, I can't talk about that. And he just plays it over and over. He goes to play golf, and 4 hours later he checks it.
Well, you know what it is. And I could talk about this. Like, getting this book vetted by the Bureau was not a pretty thing for me. They didn't welcome me with open arms. They didn't. So, I got to be careful what I put out there because, I don't want them coming for me either because I said something I shouldn't have said.
Yeah. Nope. I like this one. It's from Bruce City. He's a good fan of the show, good viewer of the show. Would he go undercover in Elizabeth, New Jersey, knowing the same case again, if he had the choice to do it all over again? Or would you decline knowing the cross that he carried?
I wouldn't change anything because it got me to where I am today. It got that case to where it was. I was just, again, the stars aligned for me. Looking back, I probably should have said, you know what, this is a little too close, but I was hungry for it. The Bureau was hungry for it. you know, a lot of people come to me and say it couldn't have been anybody but you, Giovanni. It couldn't have been, you know, because anybody else, you know, even when I infiltrated the Black Panthers for a short time, I did it as, you know, as me. You know, it's not like I did. It was because I understood it. I can breathe the air that they breathe. I could survive in that water, you know. And again, by that point in my career, there was nothing I didn't see, nothing that shocked and awed me. You know, I had seen plenty of death. I had seen plenty of violence. I worked homicide cases. I've seen bodies butchered. You know, nothing that these guys, nothing that's going to make me like, you know, take a second. When I tell you what, when I got invited down to Peterstown, to do a walkthrough, the feast, that was crazy. You know, I kept saying to myself, I got no business being here, man. I got no business. You know, and again,
you had to be looking around like, oh my God, somebody's got to know me, right?
Yeah, but you know what, Jay? The thing that bothered me the most about that, it reminded me so much of my childhood.
Yeah.
That I felt that night, I felt dirty.
Yeah.
Like I felt like, and you know, I'll set the scene for you, was walking onto the street, everybody bringing their, I mean, it was crazy, right? You guys are from that area. Yeah. Everybody bringing their couches,
I lived there.
Their love seats out for the feast to sit on their furniture, right? Yeah. It's so reminiscent of what I saw as a kid. And then here I am walking past the plastic pool with all the money in it, you know, with the statue. And, you know, I'm breaking out a C-note, you know, and I'm dropping it in. And then now, because you're dropping it in a C-note, you just called for everybody's attention, right? Now everybody wants to thank you, everybody, you know, because that's the way it was. That's the way I knew what to do. I knew how to build rapport with everybody and what was expected of me, right? That was a long walk, man. That was a block and a half, Tom?
Yeah.
You know, that was a long block and a half for me to walk.
Yeah, and you pass everything, St. Anthony's and all the different, you know, the different guess like landmarks in the area. So this one is I don't know, like this guy's kind of a jerk sometimes, but I figured I'd ask it anyway. Ask him why he's providing so many interviews showing his face if he's truly scared for his and his family's lives, like he has claimed. This guy's kind of a dick, but I figured I'd ask it anyway.
Well, it's not like I'm saying I'm going to be here at this time and this date, you know. You know, again, it's for me. I was in hiding for so long. You know, like a lot of guys, like you look at a lot of mob guys that went into hiding or went into witness protection stuff. You can only survive so long. You know, you got to think about it, man. I've lost family and couldn't go to funerals because of this. Yeah. You know, I lost guys on a job that I work with throughout that I can't go to funerals because, you know, sometimes they're just too close to home. I lost a lot. I put my personal life in a drawer from so many years that I just got to the point where I'm like, you know what, you know, hopefully these guys, when I came out with the book and even, you know, Charlie and all these guys, hopefully they realized, you know, I didn't target them. The Bureau didn't target them. These things just happen. And this is the price you pay for being a criminal and a good guy. It's cops and robbers. Yeah. Somebody's got to win sometimes. Sometimes you eat the bear. Sometimes the bear eats you. So it was the right time. And for me, the trauma and the things that I put my family through, and then everything happened with George Floyd and everything happened with the social discourse that so many cops started taking their lives. And that's really what pushed me, because so many guys took their lives and girls took their lives because of the pressure of this job, that it was time for me to start speaking out.
Yeah, that's important, because you got to look at not just the Cosa Nostra aspect, but you were true law enforcement, so you look at everything. How powerful are the DeKalbs compared to the Genovese and Lucchese New Jersey faction? Also, is it more prestigious in New Jersey to be in the Lukes and West Side New Jersey faction, or the DeKalbs because it's the home team? So which is more powerful and any prestige to being in the DeKalbs?
I don't know if anybody's more powerful, right? Like, you know, what John Gotti did in the past, the Gambinos were known for a long time. But then you got, you know, back in the day, Tino Fumara, and, you know, the way he came up and he held that, you know, he held that throne for so long, and people feared him for the longest time because, and then it was, you know, Gotti did what he did to take power. And then, but you look at Riggy, you know, Riggy was a powerhouse because he controlled everything in the contracts and the construction. So it depends on who has, you look at union jobs, right? If you get a job and somebody gets a job on a bridge, well, who's in charge of that union? Who's in charge of whatever's going on in that area? Whose backyard is it? Well, for that project, you might have to have a sit down and break it up a little bit. You know, I might give Jay a no-show job for one. He might be from a different borgata. Tom, you're from another one, so I give you a no-show. I'm running a job, but it's, you know, you allow us to all get along, right? So it's like a pendulum. It kind of swings.
Yeah. And like I said, you give a unique perspective from law enforcement. So you have Jack Pistone. I've actually spoke to Jack Garcia recently, and then you're kind of like the latest, right? So you bring us up to probably the most recent law enforcement guy. So check out Colby Roy. It's a great show, good guy. So Colby Roy has a question: is how active is the New Jersey mob nowadays, in your opinion?
Oh, as active as it ever was. I mean, they still have a stronghold. You just got to remember the scam might change, right?
Yeah.
Take bookmaking, right? Bookmaking back in the day when I started, and back in the day when we were kids, it was a numbers racket, right? You played the pick 3, you played the pick 4, you played the numbers, or everybody in the neighborhood played the numbers. If you were gambling on sports bets, it was the old tickets, long before it was online betting. And, you know, every Sunday I'd have to go out as a young kid and go chase down everybody by the pay phones with a stack of quarters. And the bookie was at the phone, you know, calling a 1-800 number in New York. Now it's changed, right, into online.
Yeah.
And it's everything. You know, now kind of a little bit of sophistication. These guys, organized crime, LCN, they're into crypto. Yeah. You know, you look at what I was doing with Charlie. I wasn't just busting heads and squeezing people in extortion. You know, we ran legitimate businesses, or we were trying to open up legit businesses to kind of even things out. So they might have, you know, the rackets change, you know, and they change with the times.
So they're still very much active.
Yeah.
2022 active.
Sure. You got, you know, and everybody says, oh, the rats and the informants, and everybody's flipping on each other. Yeah, you have more people flipping on each other. But that was also going on in the 30s. That was going on. There were rats. This is not something that people were tight-lipped back in the 20s and 30s. And they were rats then, you know. Yeah. They were always informants. That's how law enforcement does their job. You know, they got to flip people.
So here's the thing. And you being Jersey guy, Italian guy, but law enforcement, how do you view informants?
They were my livelihood.
Wow.
Right? So,
but Giovanni, and I'm sorry, Tom, but just interrupt, but just if you can play on this as well. You guys are going after somebody who, all intents and purposes, is a dirtbag. Yeah. Now he becomes Giovanni's informant. Hey, he's a great guy. Oh, he's the most honest guy in the world because he's my informant. No, he's still a dirtbag. So what Tom and I and a lot of people don't get.
Yeah, we talked about today, actually.
Right? How do you? He was a dirtbag then, and just because he's an informant, you put him up in front of a jury. The guy, oh, now all of a sudden he's telling the truth, like Honest Abe. Right. Oh, now everybody should believe him.
Yeah.
So the public's perception on these turncoats is, wait a minute, Mr. Law Enforcement, you arrested this guy selling drugs, but now he's a good witness to the stand. Come on,
right?
So if you could just add that to your answer.
Yeah. So here's what made me very unique, and here's what made me move up the ranks and not the ranks in the department, but investigative wise. If I collared somebody up for drugs and they were a drug addict, I grew up. I lost a lot of friends of drugs as a kid, right? Yeah. I mean, I remember in the 4th grade, you know, I went to meet a girl for a piece of pizza, and she was getting jacked in the arm. Wow. With heroin, you know. But by the grace of God, the guy's like, yeah, just come down. You're next. I said no, and I ran away. You know, that could have been me. So growing up in the street, I saw that. Having family with addiction, I saw. You know, so when I collared you up and you were handcuffed to a pole, and you said to me, I just can't find a bed. You know, I can't get a rehab. I'm trying to get clean. I was not your typical cop. I used to have my guys get mad at me. What are you doing? I'm going to call up and see if I can find this guy or girl a bed. You know, and I'll call a favor in. If you really want a bed, I'll get you a bed, right? Because it's life or death. And I had my friends and family overdose in my house and whatnot, right? I've seen it. So I had that empathy. So I took the time and I tried to get you a bed. And then it would pay me back tenfold. I didn't do it purposely. I did it to be a good person. And then these guys were screaming, what are you doing? We're collars for dollars. Let's go. We got to get court time. We don't save them. We just, you know, we had some old salty guys. Yeah. But then because of the way I did it, these people flipped and became informants. Now they looked out for me in the street. I actually had people in the street save my life when I was fighting for my life. Like would jump dog pile on a rabbit in and save my ass before the cops came, because they knew me in the street. So informants, when we use them, you have to corroborate everything an informant gives you. You can't just say, hey, okay, he said this guy's selling dope out of this house, let's get a search warrant. It doesn't work like that. You got to corroborate everything he says. You better hope that this guy could testify if he has to, right? And at the federal level, you have to testify in the stand a lot of times. So you better make sure that this informant you're using is 100%, But I'll tell you,
there has to be evidence to back up what he's saying.
Yeah, you better have it. You better have corroboration. If I had an informant and he goes in there and he buys a piece of coke and then comes out with an extra piece for him, I would never use that guy again in a million years. He's no good, But as you move on, like, in the early days, Colombians and Cubans, when, they were running a show with trafficking, man. I mean, I had great informants out of Cuba. They were the Marilitos off the boat. They were great informants. But as an undercover, you better be real careful, because if I bring an informant in with me to a meeting and he or she forgot to tell me, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you I owe this guy $5,000, but let me come introduce you to him. I can get called on a carpet for that. Things could break bad for me very quick. Or they're not trained like me. They can just break under pressure and go, you know what? I got to be honest with you. That guy over there, Giovanni, he's a cop. He's an undercover. I got pressured into doing this. I didn't want to do it. And they give you up. That's happened. How you talk your way out of that? So
good point. I think of that.
Slippery slope.
Now, this was I think one of the craziest stories. You're at a soccer game, enjoying your daughter's game, and you run into the Gambino guy, and you're just like, you're a Giovanni dad weekend guy, like Jason and me, not Giovanni Rocco, the wise guy. So just give us a kind of don't give too much away, because the book, we want people to buy the book, but check it out. But walk us through that story real quick. That was nuts.
So the craziest thing was, that was crazy. That was probably the worst moment, because you never want to involve your family in anything you do, and you're always trying to make sure you don't ever do that. But my wife was law enforcement. My little guy at the time, he's a little Italian Goomba, and he had seen me, and he was used to the culture, and when he saw me kiss this guy, and he even caught on. Not that he saw me kiss him and say, "Oh, this guy's somebody." Anytime my little guy wanted to interact with me, so that was a slippery slope. But thank God my wife had caught it, and she saw the way I had greeted this guy, and she saw the 2 kisses, and then she knew right away. But the problem was, the next game in the tournament, my daughter was playing his daughter. His daughter was there, and it was crazy. And I walked away, and that's when I came clean again. My father was law enforcement. He was retired by then, but he had to come pick me up walking on the side of the road after that. And I got in the car, and he was like, "What the fuck? What's going on?" And what are you doing? I said, "Yeah, listen, don't tell anybody." But at that time, I kind of came clean, because he's like, "What are you doing? What's going on?" And I told him what the case was, and he was just like, "You're out of your mind. You're 2 years. You and your wife, you're both crazy."
Wow. Jason, I know, because you might be pressed for time. What questions do you have? Feel free to jump in.
Well, I know at some point you were going to be proposed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't that, and my friend, and here's another thing that adds to this question. My friend is undercover DEA, and he got recruited the same way like you did, worked in town in Jersey, and I guess they saw what he did and whatever, recruited him. And he did the biker scenario. Now they do the cartel thing, whatever. And again, he can't tell me much, but stupid things that he can tell me. There are certain things where they're going to test you. You got to do blow. I mean, they don't not going to do heroin, but maybe if you're doing a deal on the biker undercover stuff, they wanted you to do crystal meth. I don't even know what, smoke a joint. I don't know, something. Now to be made, you got to, there's no violence. You can't beat somebody up and kill somebody, but if you didn't beat anybody up while you were with those guys, if you're not jumping in, they're going to think there's something wrong with you. So
yeah, they would.
Without telling us detail, and I don't expect you to tell us, detailed stories, but were there times where you had to do something because you had to be part of continue the operation? Were you put in that uncomfortable position, but you had to do it?
Yeah, I was put in uncomfortable positions before, Jay. A couple of them, right? Early on, my first case, it was, and again, back then it was a long-term case for me. Back then was like 6 months, right? So I had done a case with some outlaw bikers, and a guy came into a house, and I was with an informant. And he says, "Okay," he showed up, and he did exactly what you said. He says, "Okay, listen, I'm only going to sell to you. It's like, here's all my different grades," and he showed up with different grades of the product. And he says, "And we're going to test all of them out, and you can see that I'm legit and my product's good. So where do you want to start? Mid grade, high grade, low grade? Where do you want to?" And I'm like, "So what would you say?" Right? Like, again, I go back to the story I just told you with the girl, that I took out for a piece of pizza. Guy said to me, "Come on down, you're next." I would never do that. Like, what are you, crazy? And now you go to a party, you go to a barbecue, and some big dude turns around and tells you, "Hey, Jay, I got all this meth. You're going to smoke some meth." You're not going to smoke meth. You're not going to snort meth. You're not going to get out of here. What are you, nuts? And you better be able to hold your own, though. And I will say, I had a guy out in a particular San Francisco case that I helped out on.
They didn't work on.
Unrelated. That some guy came to me and he was like, "Yeah, we're doing blow and we're banging hookers all night tonight. So strap in, boys." And he walked away. And I turned my Giovanni up to 12. Wow. "Excuse me, who you think you're talking to?" I caused the scene, not in a violent way, but hey, whoa, come back here.
Yeah.
And so to the point where his boss saw it and came over because you could see the tension building. "Who do you think you're talking to? Like, you don't tell, number one, let me get this real straight. You don't tell me what to do. That's it. I'm my own man. Please don't." And I said it not in an aggressive way, but please don't be disrespectful, but you grab the attention and hope that as an undercover, you're trained to do it the right way. And I thank God we were that night, because it could have got ugly. Those guys had bodies on them. So, you just got to be careful what you do and the way you present yourself. I'm not doing drugs. I'm not doing drugs for anybody. I would never do drugs anyway. So that I bring into my undercover world. And again, how do you do that, right? My guys in my crew, some of the guys that were reporting to Charlie through me did blow, dealing in dope, did violence. I had a guy one night, one day I was sitting in his business. Charlie put me in his business, in his place of work. And this guy had a dump truck on his property. And the thing was there for months. And the guy who owned it was an older black gentleman who owned it. And he finally showed up in the property. He says, "I'm going outside. I'm going to tune this guy up. I'm going to open his skull with a pipe." And he grabbed the pipe and started going, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you doing?" So I think I write about it in a book. And I said, "Hold on. What are you, crazy? No. I'm here now. You're going to bring heat to me. You bring heat to me. You bring heat to Charlie. Yeah. You can't do this. Let me have a word with this guy." So I went outside and I talked to the older gentleman. And he wound up being the nicest guy. He's a Southern gentleman. And I said, "Listen, and he asked me, who are you?" "I'm Giovanni. That's all you need to know. And this is what you got to do, because the guy inside, he wants to come out and hit you in the head with a pipe until your brains fucking fall out. And I can't have that, And then it was like right away, "Oh, let me get my dump. All right, I'll get it off the property right now." And do you know I looked like a champ that day?
Yeah.
Because he went right back, told Charlie. And that's how I got to where I was. Because it was Charlie was all the way out in Nevada, but he got those phone calls from other people. I didn't at the end of the day go, "Charlie, let me tell you what I did today." Because that's just blowing yourself up. So when I waited and he would call me, "How was your day, my boy?" "Good. What'd you do?" "Nothing." "You didn't go anywhere?" "Nah." And again, I knew what he was getting at. I knew where he was going. "Nah, you didn't do nothing. Did you stop by this place?" Yeah, I got the office there. I was there. "So what happened? Anything happening?" "Nah." "Yes, it did. I know everything." So I would play the game and he would tell me what happened. And I go, "Man, how do you know?"
And you can use those moments to your advantage. Yeah, I love that answer. I never got an answer from somebody like that. And I love that answer because you can actually take it to your advantage where you're the guy with the head on his shoulders. You're the guy that doesn't go party with those foolish guys over there. You're the guy who's not so quick to grab the pipe and beat some over the head. You're the guy who's calm, cool, and collective who could actually do smart moves and maneuver the family in this direction or these guys in this direction. So, that's I appreciate that answer.
You can't, somebody once told me you can't fuck up you.
Yeah.
So you can't. Just be yourself.
Yeah.
Jason, what else do you got? Because I know you're.
I want one last question, and I got to run. I got to get back to work, but I appreciate all this. Lastly, the undercover brotherhood. Is there like, Skulls membership? You guys get together once every 4 years and tell old war stories? Actually, I'm only joking, but what I mean is, do you guys know each other in the undercover world? Is there like a brotherhood? Like if you saw Joe Pistone, I mean, there's like a camaraderie there, right? And have you felt that in your, everyday life now when you come across guys, whether it be on book signings or events or anything like that? Do you feel that brotherhood amongst guys like you who have gone this deep undercover work?
Yeah, I love them as if they were my blood.
Yeah.
And vice versa. And the times we did get together, it could be in the case. If we came into a case together, if somebody brought me into a case and you had seen me with somebody else, you would feel that love because it's genuine, right? So genuine that you knew. Like at the end, when I brought those bikers in, I brought those bikers in for a purpose because they were two guys I trust. They might as well have been birthed from the same woman I was because they are that close to me, to the point where we did things that was not planned, not discussed, not trained. Like they knew every morning when I'm in Vegas, I have to have a Caesar's Caesar Bloody Mary, a spicy Bloody Mary, right? Because I'm on the mend every day. Yeah. And when I had breakfast with Charlie and these guys were out there, unrelated to what Charlie was doing, and I literally was sitting there unplanned, and a waitress came over to me and says, "Are you Giovanni?" Yeah. She's like, "Well, this is for you." And it's a Bloody Mary. And I knew right away. And I said, "Who's this from?" And she said, "It's from Dutch. And he's around the corner. And when you finished having breakfast, come and see him." So here these guys are looking like, big hairy bikers and, monsters. I mean, crazy individuals. And I said, "Charles," and he goes, "What's that?" I said, "These guys are breaking my balls. They know that I have a Bloody Mary every day and this and that." I said, "But why don't you come say hi?" Yeah. I'd love to meet them. If they're like you, yeah, Charlie, these guys are like my family. So we come walking around the corner and Charlie he left like skid marks on the floor. He stopped so fast because he saw those guys. He's like, "Oh, no." Because he realized those guys were convicted felons. These guys, they looked every bit of it,
Yeah.
And he goes, No, maybe another time, But it also got me in trouble. And I write about it because about 2 hours later, I dropped Charlie off at his house. I get back to my place and he's calling me up. I was staying on the Strip and he goes, screaming at me like some psychopath. What are you doing? What are you doing? You can't have them guys stay in the Mandalay Bay where you are. It doesn't look right. You got to get them out of there. Put them downtown on Fremont Street where the animals are. That's where they belong. And then he schooled me. I said, "Charlie, what are you talking about? We're just out having a good time." But he would always make it a lesson in life. No, listen to me. You got the Bulls, you got Metro, you got FBI, you got everybody out here looking at us, Giovanni. Everybody's watching you on camera. Get them out of there or stay away from them when you're in these places.
Oh,
it was a teaching lesson.
Interesting. Jason, I want you to hear this one before you go. And I don't know if you could answer this, but when you go undercover, are you tipped off on who the CIs are and other undercovers, or are you not allowed to know the opposite? Like, how does that work?
Depending on the cases.
Okay.
Sometimes you know who they are, right? So yeah. I had a specific case where a very serious individual was an informant, a high profile informant for us in law enforcement, and very, very high profile. And he was going around making a lot of tapes against people. And I was going to be the guy that ran his social club. And it was a case where and this guy, when I met him, I went to a diner, introduced me, and then when I left, I had to go back. I got a call later that night because the guy called up the agent that was handling him and says, "What do you think? I'm a jerk off?" And the guy's like, "What?" And he went nuts on the investigator. And he says, "Wow. Don't lie to me. Don't play games with me. That guy you just introduced me to, he's a rat. You're telling people I'm an informant. You're telling people in the street that I'm." And he's like, "What are you talking about? The guy's an undercover." So I literally had to get in my car with my FBI credentials. And I had to set up another meet and show this individual because he goes, "Don't play games with me." And I showed him the ID and he had to physically see it and go, "Okay, I can't believe it. I don't play games with me. I'm not stupid." So,
wow.
And that individual, he later on found out that the guy who gave him up, he didn't relocate. and he bumped into him in Jersey, and later killed that guy, and then killed himself before we put him into witness protection.
Oh, Nikki Blades. Sorry.
Close.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, sorry. I don't know if I was allowed to say it. It's my public, but all right. So, Jason, thank you for being here. We're going to do a few more questions before we wrap up.
Giovanni,
Jason,
pleasure. I salute you, your service. Hope you're in good health and wealth, my friend. I'll see you soon. Tom, I'll talk to you. Thank you, guys. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Again, Jason. All right. So are there still, and I think I know the answer to this, but there's a lot of young guys in New Jersey, New York nowadays who actively pursue being made. How much influence do families have on younger guys, and where do they look for new members?
Yeah, there's still guys that aspire to be in the life. I mean, of course, that's what keeps it going. They look for guys that aren't flamboyant, social media driven, want to be a rock star on MTV, or, guys that really put themselves out. They look for guys that, I shouldn't have to tell you who I am. That's what they're looking for, not to say what they're looking to recruit, but yeah, there's still guys that aspire to be in the life, because I see it. I knew a lot of younger guys coming up. But it's, social media gets them, the better of them if they can stay off of that. But sometimes it's hard for the new generation. Not that I'm saying they should go into it. Nobody should, because it's a dead end. It's a dead end career, right? You know, no matter what happens and today, they're going to get you,
Now, Ron always has good questions. So I don't mean to put you in the spot, but when is all said and done, how do you feel the FBI treated you? Any bitterness? How did the pension go? Family treatment, etc. Where did you kind of land in terms of the FBI and how you felt?
So it was my supervisor, Anthony Zamponia, who I give credit for helping me and my family, because he realized, and the Bureau stepped up and did the right thing with my family and the situation. They did threat assessments, and we failed terribly, and all that stuff happened. So a lot of it is when they had to do it, they did it. They do a lot out of liability, right? Because they don't want any liability. So some is because they looked out for you, and I have some bitterness the way I went out, because I wasn't ready to retire by any means.
Yeah.
And kind of Joe, a lot of stories you talked to. It was who you mentioned before, Jack Garcia.
Yeah.
I walked around with a lot of bitterness after I had written a book with my co-author Doug, and we came up with this manuscript, and then they just tore my manuscript apart, just to break my horns. Sometimes I thought so. I had a lot of resentment when I was doing that. And again, I had so much more life in me to do law enforcement, but I was forced to retire and just focus on me. Then when they did focus on me when I was still active, it was like, because they didn't know what I was doing or where I was. And there was some resentment within the agencies, different agencies.
Yeah.
And then, there was some, but Jack was the one who actually told me in a conversation. He was like, yeah, listen, they it happens to all of us. We all feel like a man on an island at the end. That made it this far. And, it was Jack that said, he welcomed me into a small little group of guys. And
oh, wow.
It's not a group I aspired to be in by any means. I respect all those guys. Looking back, I wish I could do more law enforcement work. I just do it in a different way now. It took me many years to get to where I am now, to try to reinvent myself, to still want to be a part of law enforcement and help them. So I'm able to do that now.
So, okay. Thanks, Mo. You're making me rich tonight with $1.99 chats. So the thing that I always talk about, and that I've witnessed, were the guys that were either kind of made guys that had really successful, legitimate businesses. Now they'd leverage your LCN connection, right? Or associates that kind of would use the family and kick up, or they got a preferential deal, especially in construction in New Jersey. Why don't these guys go like 95% legit, and then always have the aura of being, the aura of being the mob? So like, you can't mess with them. Why don't you think that is more like a Freemasonry or something? I get shit when I say this, but it makes sense to me that they can make probably more money now with like the way things are. Why don't they go legit with like kind of like living off their legacy? What do you think?
Well, some guys is driven. Each individual is different, but some guys, if they came up that way, it's still the sexiness and the thrill of the scam, right? The thrill of the scheme. That's the adrenaline in them, right? Just like anything else. For me, it was undercover work was my adrenaline. That was my addiction. So yeah, just to get over. Sometimes guys some guys just can't get out of it because they don't want to be straight laced guys that have to do taxes and keep records and all of that stuff. They don't want to be bothered. Sometimes it's just fast money is better for me, and I want cash in pocket, the under the table, or just the thrill of the hunt. Right, like growing up in a neighborhood when stuff fell off the back of the truck.
Yeah,
and it's kind of in a bigger way, right?
Yeah.
Well, if I can get this, if I can get this, or I don't have to pay this for it, I can get it at this price. No, that's kind of the thrill of it.
Now, how about this? If you could answer this, I had the Cavs at 7 crews, 7 captains, 7 crews. Your intelligence that you're allowed to share from that time. How many made guys? How many crews? And what can you speak to?
So when I was in, it was crazy. I can't put a specific. I remember back in the day when the decavs were at their strongest. When I was an investigator and sitting on Costantino's funeral home and doing investigations on them, or doing.
You buried my father, Carl.
Yeah. And just watching these guys at their strongest, right? I don't think when I infiltrated them, they were at their strongest numbers. But again, there was that divide in the family. Riggy was stepping down. I can't read that.
No, because God, I'm probably in for my old show, new show. Besides from my old, I'm in 450 shows, right?
Right.
But last 150 on YouTube, right? And I made the mistake of a few times, probably about 5. It's not, but just a lot. That I had a few drinks and overindulged, right? They kept coming alive, and I would have a scotch, and I overindulged, right? So 3% of the time. Everybody sits there and now calls me a lush, says I drink too much, blah, blah, blah. So it's like they focus on that 3% and the 97% gets ignored. So thank you, Mo. Finally. So he's like, you might as well drink and you'll get what Tom has. Anyway, keep going.
It doesn't matter. One drink and you're drunk.
Exactly.
If they see the one.
Exactly.
There's so many old sayings you could pick from that too, but I'm not going to say any of them. But yeah, I mean, the decavs were strong. They were divided. When I came into that family and started the investigation, they were probably nowhere at their strongest numbers. You got guys that were older guys that were like, I mean, they were still hardcore guys. I mean, I went to the captains. I was at one captain's house, and he was on oxygen, for God's sake. But he was like, you know what? If I got to get in this car and I got to drive, I'm telling you right now, and they were so frustrated. So, because there was that divide in the family at the time. So, and again, I'm not, that's an intelligence division's problem. You count the bodies. I'm not going to sit there and go, so Charles,
Correct.
how many guys do we have on our team and what are all their names? So, I can go back and look like a rat, So I didn't ask too much, but I went according to what I saw. I went according to the respect that they had. Again, being out in Vegas, and there were guys from Jersey that would come out from different Borgatas and different families, and I saw the respect. So I knew the decaf still had their respect, and their numbers are still strong. They're not at their strongest, but like everybody, they rebuild. So
now, obviously they had Pistone, they had Garcia, many informants. When you got in, we understand you build trust, and we understand all this stuff that goes along with that, right? We've seen, you shared a lot tonight. But what were some of the protocols or changes the mob made that made it more difficult to navigate because of the Falcones and the Pistones, or did they not smarten up and it was like a hot knife through butter? Walk us through that.
So, I mean, speaking just to the decavs, I mean, I did jobs over my career where guys from Sicily came over, like Zips would come over from families over there, and we did meetings with them here in different cases. And I saw that, wow, like I was shocked to see that the old world is still in touch. And sometimes it depends on the family that you were dealing with at the time. I wasn't looking to infiltrate the mob into Cosa Nostra on that case, but it just took a spin for it. And I was just a cameo on some of these things because I got asked to do these cameos because I had the stink, right? Yeah. That's what I had on me. I had the Jersey stink. So no matter what you put me in, if I put my, my warm up tracksuit, my Adidas shoes, my slippers with the white socks, and, I went into a certain culture, I didn't have to say who I was. They just assumed that I was a guy from New York, and I must have been hooked up, and I was in the Godfather movies. Yeah, they would just make this story. They'd come up with it themselves. Yeah, I mean, it depends. I went on a rant and kind of lost my train of thought.
No. So you were kind of saying like what, because they went through the Falcone, like if you're a mobster,
Yeah.
if someone was a big disaster, Falcone was a disaster, right? They were scared of you, right? So did they learn from the lesson and change protocols and kind of make it harder for you? Where you're like, when you have drinks with Jack, you're like, Jack, but your days it was easier because now they have different rules and protocols. Or did they not learn their lesson and it was fairly easy for you to get in? You know what I mean? I'm trying to see if the mob smartened up and made it a lot harder for you with maybe protocol changes or any adjustments.
So I don't know what the decabs are doing now.
Yeah.
I think I would think, right, if I was a betting man, I would say they're going to be really close to the vest now because, again, when I infiltrated them, they're probably one of the most close-knit families, crime families there are, because if you're not from that neighborhood and you're an outsider, they're going to look into you and somebody's got to vouch for you. And I just had the ability to say I was with Charlie Stango and then no more questions.
Yeah.
Well,
the administration, and even I think you would have gotten to the administration, but the administration for the decavs has been untouched for about, since Riggy. I mean, for 20 years, no?
Yeah. And I actually met the day I went on record and Charlie made it known that I speak for him. And, there was no ceremony. I'm not trying to say that I would.
Yeah.
But I went to the store. The administration was called. I went there that day, sat with the administration, sat with the street boss and other guys and the consigliere, and they made it known who I was. And let me tell you, man, I had a lot of puckering going on that day because I knew I made it to that level of administrative level. And when somebody from the administration says to you, okay, so what are you doing and how are you doing it? And then you got to answer for it. And then he turns around and says, all right, take my number. And if you need anything at all, just call me direct.
Oh, shit. Now, we're going to conclude, and I got to be careful how I navigate this. Not for you, but for me. Okay. So I've interviewed countless mob guys. I'm going to do more law enforcement. You're inspiring me to do that. But I never got until I interviewed you. And I talked about you offline, and I'm not going to go into details. But what I found interesting was when somebody called me and asked me about our interview, they didn't ask anything about you. I don't know how to tell you because that'd be a safety issue. But they disagreed with the book, and they were who they were. I'll leave it at that, right?
Yeah.
And I was able to build trust quickly because they know me as a podcaster. But I was also able to say, hey, here's who I'm related to. He was related to like my first cousin, blah, 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 right? Not that it makes me think special. But what I'm getting at is I got a phone call from a protege of yours, his friend, right? Where they kind of called bullshit on some of the parts of the book. I kind of gave pushback. I said, listen, you can ask questions. I could get it on the show and that kind of stuff. But like, why do you think, or parts of the book, why do you think maybe there might have been pushback? Because it's a pretty straightforward book. Even if I couldn't find anything that they could push back on, but yet they were pushing back. So what do you think if I'm in Elizabeth and I have your book and I go sit down at Sacco's and have a nice sandwich? What are they saying about the book, do you think? Or why do you think they're calling it BS, if that makes sense?
Well, because think about it, right? You let me in.
Yeah. You
got egg on your face, right? And the beauty of it is when early on, I heard a lot of one of the reviews, when people knock in, they want to just, there's haters out there in the reviews on a book and, oh my God, this guy's full of this, full of that. And I'm good. I mean, I got signed off by the Bureau. I submitted the manuscript. They read it thoroughly. They took out certain names or whatever they didn't want. The only difference I made in the book was to change some of the names out of respect for some guys if they didn't have a criminal history. I was introduced to some guys and I might have changed the name of a business or who owns the business because I know that's their livelihood, right? Yeah. And that's my culture as a kid growing up. I know that why would I mention Tom's last name and what business he was in? For what? For notoriety? That's not my game. So a lot of research went into it. And as long as you're on Wikipedia and somebody on Google, and I'm going to say, I still to this day call it the Google, because when I was in that life, a lot of the older guys call it the Google.
Correct.
So if you were on the Google and it said you were Cosa Nostra, your name's going in that book. So, and the beautiful thing is, every day I did something, there were tapes and videos.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys, oh my God, how could he remember conversation? How could he remember what he said? How could he remember what this guy Tom replied with? Because there's tapes.
Yeah.
You know, maybe 2-3 times. Every conversation I had and I talk about, it's on tape. So I can't make a story up about you. You want to hear your voice? I'll be more than happy. Go get the tapes from the Bureau and play them and listen to them. That's what I say to people, you know.
I guess one last question before we wrap up. So I dropped it a few times. I'm going to drop it again. I recommend buying the book directly. Are you still signing the books that people order through you, Giovanni?
I do, yeah. I have a website.
So the website is Giovanni Drinks. I dropped it a few times. For those people watching on the replay, I'm going to put it below. I highly recommend the book, but get it through him. Probably makes a few more bucks on it as well, so he'll sign it. So it's a little better for you to get it that way. Or if not, get it on Amazon, whatever you prefer. But the one thing I never understood in terms of the mob, right? Well, 2 questions. Okay. The first question is, why didn't they learn from their mistakes? Meaning, like when I got the call from the person who's questioning you, I was able in 2 minutes to say, hey, here's who my father was, here my mother was, here's my cousins. And they could have like quickly found out to see if I was lying, right? Number 2, they make a lot of money. Why don't they hire ex-feds to maybe check background checks? Like why don't they put more resources into counterintelligence? I never understood that. That's my first question.
So I'm not giving up tradecraft.
Yeah.
It came to save my life probably in the end. I had a criminal history. If I got stopped by a cop and that cop pulled me over, he knew when he ran my license, he knew I was arrested for attempted murder. He knew I was arrested I had a long record in this case. I had several different identities, but Giovanni Gatto, he was a bad guy. And if you,
if I hired you today to vet Giovanni Gatto, would you pick something up, or that shit was clean?
No, it was clean.
Okay.
Clean.
Okay.
Yeah, we call it scrubbing.
Got it. Okay. I don't want to give it too much away. Then my last question before we wrap up, and of course we'll give you the final say, is why don't they go for the big money guys and get away from the street? I know they want the street stuff. But there's crypto, there's construction, there's I've done okay for myself, right? And I didn't need them, right? You know what I mean? Like, why did they approach more guys like me? They're first generation. Hey, listen, you want to get away from the street nonsense? Hey, Tom, you become a lawyer. You become a doctor to write pills. Why don't they cultivate assets and build like an empire based off of the sons and daughters of the people that were there before them? It just seemed like they kind of stuck to the street and didn't evolve, right?
Well, we were working on that. You look at Charlie and myself. Yeah. Charlie had a lot of things going on. Charlie's a brilliant mind. He's an amazing businessman.
Yeah.
Very quick. He can make money doing a lot of different things. And he just, smart as a whip. The stuff you come out with blew my mind, and I had to dumb it down and, and play stupid around him. But I was truly impressed on some of the business minds and ventures that he had us in, legitimate ventures.
Yeah.
So we would have to, and again, I talk about it in the book, we were opening up a club in Vegas. Well, we were acquiring it, and I was going to manage it. And we had this whole big plan, and it was legit. It was legit business, legit club. It was going to run the right way. But as far as the crypto, they're in it. They're in it already. They're doing it. They might not be the guy doing it, but they're going to find a guy, Tom. They're going to find a guy, Giovanni, that knows what he's doing. And they're just old school. They're going to squeeze you. You're going to do the crypto for them. They're going to do it. They're doing all the things that you mentioned.
Good point. Now, we're not going to answer this because you got to read the book. Why didn't Giovanni get made? But you got to read the book. So, Giovanni, I'll give you the final say before we wrap it up.
I'm glad the case ended when it did. I'll tell you right now, one of the conversations I had was, when I do this deed that they wanted me to do, and the deed is in the book, when this happens, I questioned it. because I was afraid that I was going to get clipped.
Wow.
You know, if they pulled the deed that I was going to do, and they changed their mind, and the administration changed their mind, it was only me and a few people, including administration, that knew this was going to happen. So if they pulled the plug, I was going to wind up. So I challenged Charlie at the end. When our relationship got to that point, I challenged him. I talked about it. And I said, and I'm not going to give you the answer, but I said, if I do this, where does this leave me? You're going to be good. You're going to be sitting pretty.
Yeah.
And that's when the conversation was had in his house. And he told me how it was going to end and what was in the future for him, what was in the future for me, and how the family was going to wind up.
Wow, that's amazing. So just real quick, guys, thanks to Steven who had on the show. The armchair merch store is up, but I don't want you to buy any merch yet. Buy some merch soon. You got to get Giovanni's book, Giovanni's ring. Giovanni, thank you for being on the Armchair MBA.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.